Have you ever looked at someone you know, a kind neighbor, a devoted parent, a friendly colleague, and wondered how they could do something truly awful? Or have you ever looked at the news, at a nation spiraling into cruelty or corruption, and asked yourself, how can so many ordinary people let this happen? It's a deeply unsettling question, isn't it? It shakes our belief in basic human decency. We like to think that evil is an external force, something that belongs to them, the criminals, the tyrants, the heartless monsters. It's a comforting thought. But what if the truth is far more complicated and much closer to home? History, psychology, and even ancient philosophy all point to a terrifying reality. The line separating good and evil doesn't run between different groups of people. It runs straight through the middle of every single human heart. It runs through me, and it runs through you. The famous psychoanalyst Carl Jung put it this way: the brighter the light, the darker the shadow. He argued that every person has a shadow self. This isn't necessarily a monster lurking inside you. It's simply the collection of all the parts of our personality that we hide, repress, and refuse to acknowledge. Our insecurities, our selfish impulses, our hidden resentments. We push these things down because they don't fit the image of the good person we want to be. But Jung issued a stark warning. What we deny in ourselves doesn't just disappear, it festers, and often we project it onto others. That secret insecurity we feel about our own intelligence. We might start seeing others as arrogant or stupid. That hidden greed, we might accuse everyone else of being materialistic. Once we project our shadow onto someone else, it becomes frighteningly easy to justify hurting them. We're not just disagreeing with them anymore. We're fighting the very thing we despise in ourselves. Only now we see it in them. Think about it in everyday life. The teacher who publicly humiliates a struggling student. The manager who constantly bullies a junior employee. The online troll who leaves vicious comments on a stranger's post. None of these people likely woke up that morning and thought, "Today I will be evil." In their own minds, they are probably justified. The teacher thinks they're motivating a lazy student. The manager believes they're toughening up a weak employee. The troll feels they are speaking the truth to someone who deserves it. They all see themselves as the good guy in their own story. So, how does this self-deception work? How do good intentions curdle into harmful actions? This is where one of the most famous and controversial experiments in psychology comes in. In the early 1960s, a Yale psychologist named Stanley Milgram wanted to understand how ordinary people could become agents of terrible acts, like those seen during the Holocaust. He designed an experiment that, on the surface, seemed simple. He recruited volunteers for a study on memory and learning. Each volunteer was assigned the role of teacher, while another person, secretly an actor, was the learner. The teacher's job was to read a list of word pairs, and the learner had to memorize them. Here's the twist. The learner was strapped into a chair in another room, and every time they made a mistake, the teacher was instructed to deliver an electric shock. In front of the teacher was a machine with a row of switches, starting from a mild 15 volts and going all the way up to a terrifying 450 volts, labeled Danger, Severe Shock, and finally, XXX. With each wrong answer, the teacher had to increase the voltage. As the shocks got stronger, the actor in the other room would begin to cry out in pain, plead to be let go, complain about a heart condition, and eventually fall silent. Now, before he ran the experiment, Milgram polled his colleagues, psychiatrists, graduate students, other professors. He asked them to predict the outcome. They all agreed. Only a tiny fraction, perhaps 1%, the sadistic fringe, would go all the way to 450 volts. What actually happened shocked the world. It wasn't 1%, it wasn't even 10%. In the most well-known variation of the experiment, Nearly two-thirds, 65% of participants, administered the full 450-volt shock even after the learner had gone completely silent. These were ordinary people. They weren't monsters. They were teachers, engineers, postal workers. They showed immense stress, sweating, trembling, stuttering, begging the experimenter to let them stop. But when the man in the lab coat calmly said, "The experiment requires that you continue," most of them did. The Milgram experiment revealed something profound and deeply disturbing about human nature. It wasn't personal cruelty that drove these people. It was the power of authority and the diffusion of responsibility. The participants weren't acting out of their own malice. They were just following orders. They had handed over their moral judgment to the authority figure in the room. The responsibility in their minds no longer rested on their shoulders. It belonged to the experimenter. This is what political theorist Hannah Arendt famously called the banality of evil. Evil, she argued, isn't always committed by fanatics or sociopaths. More often it's committed by ordinary people who simply stop thinking for themselves. They accept the given roles, obey the given orders, and detach from the consequences of their actions. This brings us back to that line inside each of us. The Milgram experiment and Jung's concept of the shadow both tell us that the potential for harm isn't an on-off switch. It's a slippery slope. It begins with small compromises. It starts when we allow ourselves to see another person as less than human, as a learner in an experiment, a competitor at work, or a member of an out-group we don't understand. It grows when we outsource our conscience to a boss, a political leader, or a social trend. We tell ourselves we're just a small cog in a big machine, that our individual actions don't really matter. But they do. Every small act of obedience, every moment of willful ignorance paves the road for something much worse. So what can we do? How do we stay on the right side of that internal line? The first step is awareness. It's about having the courage to look at our own shadow, to acknowledge our own capacity for selfishness, for anger, for prejudice, without shame, but with honesty. When you feel that surge of anger at a colleague or that flash of judgment toward a stranger, ask yourself, what part of me is this coming from? Is this really about them, or is it about an insecurity or fear within me? This kind of self-reflection isn't easy. It requires humility, but it's our most powerful defense against projecting our own darkness onto the world. The second step is to consciously reclaim our personal responsibility. Milgram's experiment showed the danger of blindly following orders. The antidote is to cultivate a habit of moral courage. This means being willing to question authority even when it's uncomfortable. It means being the one person in the room who says, "Wait, is this right?" It doesn't require grand, heroic gestures. It can be as simple as refusing to participate in office gossip, speaking up when someone makes a prejudiced joke, or choosing compassion over judgment in your daily interactions. It's about remembering that even when you're part of a group, you are still an individual with a conscience, and you're always responsible for your own choices. Ultimately, the battle between good and evil isn't fought on some distant, epic battlefield. It's fought in the quiet moments of our daily lives. It's fought in the choice to listen instead of shouting, to understand instead of condemning, and to see the humanity in others, especially when it's difficult. The world doesn't need more people who are certain of their own goodness. It needs more people who are aware of their own capacity for both light and shadow, and who choose, day by day, moment by moment, to act from a place of courage, empathy, and responsibility. That's how we keep ourselves and our world from slipping into the dark. Thanks so much for watching. If this video gave you something to think about, please consider liking it and subscribing to the channel for more explorations into the complexities of the human mind. Stay thoughtful, and I'll see you in the next one.